DOT-WARE. Dot where? Dot where? DOT-WARE. So look for the video that says live now. Live now. So you need to refresh the page, but you're going to see a video that says live. It's exactly my computer screen. This will help you a lot because as I do the instruction, you really go back and forth. It has a little bit of a lag. So if you're listening to me talking in here and then in there, it can be a little confusing. So if you need to only use the headphones, that's fine. Or if it's good to just refer back, or maybe you just listen to me, but you don't use the headphones, but you use it to look at it, whatever. Either of those is fine. So you've all launched UE4 Editor, I hope, right? If not, do that right now. We're about to get started. So you went to Launchpad and typed in UE4, shows UE4 Editor. Launchpad is at the bottom of the map. And you should all be looking basically at a screen like mine. Some of you probably opened up your horror project. That's fine. Continue what we did in the horror project. Yeah, let's do that real quick. Let's, because last time we didn't finish the lesson, right? We didn't get the flashlight turn on and off. Okay, we did not. All right, cool. So we'll finish that right now. Yeah, question. Okay, hold on. I like that. So, by the way, open up the project that started last time, the horror project. We're going to use that. We're going to make it so you can turn your flashlight on and off. That'll be introducing the coding of underneath. For those of you who need a refresh. You were a loved one. I don't know. All right, ready to learn a lot? No, I am. Let's get started. So we're gonna do our horror game project. I'm gonna start from scratch and run through it really fast. That way you kind of get an idea of what we did Tuesday. It's been like 2 days since we saw each other. So what we did, and for what I want you to do is just to open up that project we did last class. Don't start it fresh because I'm gonna go too fast for this. This is what we did. We chose a third-person template. We named that template, you know, horror game or whatever. No spaces. And then we hit create project. And this is where it creates the template in Unreal that we're going to start with. And we're going to start with a level with some blocks and shapes and a pair of stairs and whatever, right? And this guy that can run around. I guess stairs don't come in pairs, but whatever. It is a stair, a stairwell. And we have a third-person character that we're going to turn into a first-person character. And we're going to make it all nighttime by deleting everything that makes it day. And then we're going to give him a spotlight and code that spotlight to behave like a flashlight. Okay, here we go. This is our template. Okay. Hit escape there. And what I showed you before is like, okay, you drag materials, right? Materials come from this bottom panel, the bottom, called the content browser. And you look for the materials folder and you can just drag and drop. Also, when you click on something like these stairs, for example, you can edit any of its properties, any of its characteristics in the details panel on the right. I can also change its material in the details panel. To the left of me, if you take the talking down, that would really help me teach this lesson. All right, so on the details panel where it says materials, you want to click on that material and you want to choose whatever you want, right? So I'm going to choose this yellow thing, whatever. This is another way of bringing materials onto something. Okay. Next up, what we did is we brought in some point lights, right? And we changed the color of those point lights. Again, all happening in the details panel, which we'll be using a lot today, details panel. Okay, and then you have the world outliner, and this is where we delete things. So we deleted the sky. Here we deleted the two lights, light source and skylight. And finally, we deleted the fog, right? Remember this? And then we had a nighttime scene. When I hit play, now I'm running around something at night. Then we took this third-person character and we opened up his blueprints. Okay, we clicked on him. In the details panel, we did edit blueprint, open blueprint editor. That opens him up. Okay. My pet peeve, what I ask everybody to do is to make this a full window whenever it comes up. So what I like to do is drag the tab right here up, right next to the tab next to it. We have a full window to work with. This is a little blueprint coding we're going to be doing together in a second. Talked about the construction script a little bit. It's another place for coding. And then the viewport. When we do the viewport, we select the camera, and we move the camera forward over here and into the guy's head, just like that. And now when I hit play, I have a first-person game. So I hit escape. Okay. Now let's continue off of what we did last time. That was the whole lesson that we covered. My map looks similar to yours. If you loaded it, if you opened up your project, and you should now have this first person thing. I want you to, if you haven't already, I think we did do this, but if you haven't, I'll go slow enough. What we did is we're going to add a spotlight to our character, right? So again, if you're just starting off, I want you to find your third person character, click on him. In the details panel, hit edit blueprint, open blueprint editor, and then move on over in these tabs here over to the viewport tab so we can see what he looks like. And to add things like a spotlight to him, we do that through the Add Component button on the upper left. So we click the green Add Component. And what we do is we type in Spotlight. Spotlight is like one of 4 lights that you can use, 4 light types that are in Unreal. And Spotlight emits light in a certain direction, just like a flashlight. So it's perfect for what we're trying to do. And then we choose Spotlight. And now it's added to our character. And you want to position the spotlight so it's in the right place. So I'm going to make sure it's rotated in the right way. And it's kind of where I want my light to go. And then also I want to change its settings in the details panel. Again, on the right. The intensity they give you, whatever number it is, for me it's 5,000, is pretty weak. So you want to up that intensity by a lot. I'm going to change mine to 20,000. And of course, you could also change the light's color. Right, so maybe for my flashlight, I'm going to have this yellowy, kind of old yellow flashlight. And when you have that spotlight, I would make sure that you add it to, if it's on in your details panel, whatever it's indented, you know, like it's indented under, that's what's called its parent, right? So spotlight is like the child, that's the baby. And you have the mesh, that's mommy. We want the parent, in this case, to be the camera. That way, wherever the camera looks, the spotlight is sure to go. It will look in that direction. So put spotlight, I'm going to drag it onto follow camera if it isn't on there already. And if I hit play, I have this light that looks wherever I look. And there it is, this yellow kind of dim light. Good for a horror game. But so far, there isn't anything in this game that you would really refer to as player agency. The player can't do anything yet. So how do we change that? How do we make it so the player can do something? Player agency is important, giving your player the ability to make choices so that they feel like they're the ones running this world, not the game designer. And as game designers, you kind of have to be sneaky. You design a world with limits. You design a world where you know what you want your player to feel. You never want the player to feel like they're being told their experience. They're being told how to feel. You want them to discover those feelings independently, as if they're the ones responsible for coming up with that feeling. So that's player agency. The simplest way to make player agency come out in a game, of course, is to make it so that player has choices to do something or to not do something. And we're going to do that right now by letting the player have the choice to turn on and off the flashlight. So they could either have this on or off. So if you're hitting play, hit escape to get out of that. All right, we all have our spotlights now. Let's code this spotlight to turn on and off. So I'm going to go over to the event graph. Once you go to the event graph tab, okay, so we're on viewport, click on event graph. Here we're on event graph. To move around the event graph, you hold down the right mouse button and you drag your mouse, okay, so you move around. And I want you to find an empty area of graph where we have nothing in the way, okay? So right-clicking and dragging down to an area of graph where nothing to see. Now, I said it's player agency, so what's going to cause this light to turn on and off is going to be an event that the player causes. And that could be any number of things. It could be, you know, the player on a controller pressing the Y button, if it's an Xbox controller, or, you know, on a keyboard pressing a certain button on their mouse. What do you want to do? What's a good button to use for turning on our light? F? You want to do F? H, F? I heard F first. Okay, we'll do F. F for flashlight. So right-click once on your empty area of graph, and you get this menu comes up. This menu has access to all of the functions possible that you could ever
need to develop a game with. Okay, that's why it's so big and so large. Everything in here that your game can be made with is in here. And we want to look up the F key, so type in F space key, and you'll come up with a section called keyboard events, and just choose a thing called F. And that gives us this event, right? The events are red, they look like this. And you see it has a pressed thing, and it even has a released thing, so you can sense when a player releases the key, which you won't use much, but occasionally you might need to do some code for when a player releases a key. But in this case, we're just going to drag off of the pressed on F, let go. And once we let go, you have that menu that comes up with all of the possible functions and things that we would want to script into our game. In this case, let's do something called a strange name called a flip-flop. A flip-flop. And choose that. And all this is a bizarro name for a toggle. A toggle toggles between two states, on or off, A or B, right? So if we did A before, it's going to do B the next time. If we did B before, it's going to do A the next time, and so on and so forth. It's going to flip between those two things, which is perfect for turning on and off a flashlight, right? The light can either be on or it can be off, and that's it. There's no in between. So when the player presses F, it's either going to do the code for turning it off, or it's going to do the code for turning it back on. So that's why we're using the flip-flop. It's kind of like a toggle. Okay. Next up, and by the way, to get these wires, right, we're left-clicking and dragging. That's the whole idea. And you got to drag sideways triangles, go into sideways triangles, things like that. What we want to do next is we want to bring our spotlight onto the graph, because what that allows us to do is to do anything to that spotlight. Anything that's in its details panel that we were changing when we were making our spotlight brighter or changing its color, that sort of thing, can be done on the blueprint, which means it can be done while the game is being played. We can change the details of something while the game is being played. And that's what we're going to do right now, is we're going to drag spotlight. So on the left, you have your components tab where it says spotlight. Just drag that literally just onto your graph. Drag spotlight onto your graph. And then spotlight has this little blue bubble here. You drag off of spotlight. And then now you have access to everything that the spotlight has in its details panel. Okay? And there's many ways that we can turn a light on and off. It's not just one way. One way, think about it, is we did turn the light brighter before, right? I changed mine to 5,000 to 20,000. So let's change it. We could set its intensity, right? That's what that variable was that we were changing. If we set its intensity to 0, how bright is it going to be?
Not at all.
Not at all. So let's set its intensity to 0. So type in the word intensity after dragging off of the spotlight and choose set intensity. And by default, this is where it says new intensity. It is 0, which is perfect. All you got to do there is plug in A to the front of the set intensity node. And we want to do that again for the B channel, but this time we want to turn our light back on, right? So in this case, I could drag off spotlight again, drag off of spotlight, type in set intensity, or just intensity, and get the set intensity node, and then drag B into set intensity. And where it says new intensity for the B channel, we want this one to be bright again, right? So I'm going to put that as 20,000. That's it. That code should work, right? All we're saying is when the player presses F, I want you to start out by doing A, and if they press F again, go back to B. If they press F again, go back to A, so on and so forth. For the A channel, I want you to take my spotlight and give it a new intensity of 0, so it's off. And for the B channel, I want you to take my spotlight and give it a new intensity of 20,000, so it's really bright. So it's on and off, on and off. All right, that's it. Now, if we hit play, moment of truth, right? We're going to test this code out. I go up to this wall. I'm looking around. I'm going to press the F key, because we coded it for, and it turns off. Press F again, it turns back on, and so on and so forth. Now your player has agency. Now your player can do something in the game. You're that much closer to having something that can be played. If you think of a video game as just an experience with a list of features. We just added one. We just added one in a very short amount of time. And I think that's why this program and why doing this sort of stuff can be so powerful. Is you're already on your way to having that list of features, that list of things the player can do. And once you knock out that list, you have something that can be played and something that can be sold. That's the flashlight tutorial. So I'm gonna hit escape, file, save all, and let's move on to our AI tutorial, okay? So hit save, and then I want you to go to File, New Project. File's gonna be in the upper left of all your Mac screens, upper left. You File, New Project. And I'll give it a minute, but just a minute, because I want to get started right away on this. I want you saving, and I want you on the New Project tab as quickly as possible. I can tell you right off the bat, we're going to be doing a third-person template again. So when you do have File, New Project up here, I want you to choose third-person template, and you can just name this NPC project. And then hit create. Yeah. You want me to come by real quick?
Sure. Like it's something it's something like on the computer side. It's not been allowing me to use these computers to max to launch any programs.
Let me come by. If it's, I can only do about a minute because we're live streaming and everything. So let me come by. And guys, this is going to be about 1 more minute. What I want everyone to do, if you're following along the lesson, is to have a new project and make it in the third-person template and then hit create, okay? So everybody should be creating a third-person template right now, and some of you probably have it open. Yeah, that's what his computer is doing. I'm not sure what's going on here. I don't know anything about this. I know that they had it over there, and I had one of our people switch. Let me see.
Like any computer I'm trying to like this is the second computer I turned it on. This is the second Mac computer I turned it on. On my it does it for my
No, actually someone else is going to start doing it on the same thing. Yeah. It says broken library. That was it you? Yeah. Yeah. And I had you move to the other computer, right? Yeah. Is it working on that computer? Yeah. Okay, so he moved to another computer. If there's an empty computer you want to try doing that in your same account, but it works for him. Okay? All right, we're going to get started. This is lesson number 2 of the day. So if you didn't follow along before and now you want a second chance, here you go. Blank slate, brand new project, third-person template. Get it opened up. All right. I want all of you to kind of zoom out so we see the back, we see the full view of our level. What you're going to do is you can either hold down the right mouse button and fly backwards, or you can scroll, use the scroll wheel on your mouse, and then just move backwards like that. The reason I want to do this is I want to make a really big landscape. I want to make a landscape where our NPCs can have a lot of room to roam around and run around in. So you're scrolling back and your view should look like mine. And what I want you to do is once you've scrolled back enough, I want you to hit the landscape tool, which is the mountain icon in the upper left mountain icon. Click on that mountain, right? It's a mountain because it's for landscapes. And now you're going to be in landscape mode. Now that you're in landscape mode, you'll see on the left, you have all these different options for the landscapes. Hey, you guys just come in late? Or find your name on there and just wipe off the marking at the bottom. Okay. All right, where it says material on the left, change
that material in the dropdown to something that you like. I like grass, for example. I think grass is a good material for a landscape. So make sure there's a material there, and then just hit create. Okay. The size of the landscape is fine. Just hit create. Now your landscape might look like it's checkerboard color for a second. That's because it's loading the materials currently. But this is a landscape. While it's loading, you'll notice that now your mouse is this little brush, this kind of circular thing. This is a sculpt tool. This is not really a landscape tutorial, but just as a reminder, you can click a couple times or hold down, click, but it can be, if you hold down the left mouse button, you'll get kind of unrealistic mountains. It'll sculpt it too fast. So I just like to click a little bit, and you can create these hills and stuff into your landscape, which is really fun to do, and will give character to your world and give your NPCs something interesting to kind of move around in. Now, what if you want to lower the landscape, not just raise it up? Just hold the shift key with your mouse, and now click. While you're holding shift with your mouse, it'll lower the landscape. Now I said we're in landscape editing mode, which is true, which means we can't do anything else until we're out of this mode. And the next thing I want you to do is to delete these 4 walls on our level so that we can go run around our landscape. We need to delete them, but you can't delete them as long as you're in landscape mode. So let's go back to the normal placing mode, which you do by hitting this leftmost icon called place in the upper left of Unreal. Just click place, and now we're back to the normal front of Unreal. Just click that place button. Once you're in the place mode now, you can of course click things and move them and rescale them, rotate them, do all the level designing stuff we've been doing. What I want you to do is click on a wall, hit the delete key, click on all 4 walls and delete all of them. Just click on it and hit the delete key. And again, what that's going to do is it's going to let me roam around my world. I'm going to hit escape so I can get out of that mode. All right, so I have this world that I can run around in. Let's start getting to work on our NPC code. So first things first, my approach to just about anything is to not start from scratch. I'm not going to code something totally from scratch with a blank blueprint. Instead, what's going to be close to an NPC is our player character, right? Our player character is this third-person guy, right? He's got a body, he's got a mesh, he's got collision, he's got all the things we already want for an NPC. So what we'll do is we're just going to duplicate his blueprint, right, his coded object, and rename that duplication NPC, and then just modify his code to be and behave and look and act like an NPC should, right? So to do that, we can't just make a copy in the viewport. We have to make a copy within the content browser because we're making a new blueprint out of him. So what we want to do is we want to find our third-person character in our content browser. So to do that, you can just type in the search bar here, third person, and when you find third-person character, that's what you want. You want to right-click on that and hit duplicate. Once again, in content browser, type in third person, and then when you find the thing labeled third-person character, right-click on it and duplicate it. And when you duplicate it, it's going to ask you to name it. I want you to name it NPC. Name it NPC. NPC, that stands for non-player character. So any game where there's other characters in it that you see, you can interact with, those are NPCs, non-player characters. Okay, once you've named the NPC, let's find our NPC. So now type in the search bar NPC. So now you're typing in the search bar NPC because it probably disappeared after you renamed it, right? But if you type in the search bar NPC, you're going to find it. And let's double click on an NPC to open up his blueprint. So open up your NPC blueprint. Again, this is not the third-person character. This is a duplicate of it that we renamed NPC. We double-click on NPC in the content browser in order to open it up. You could also drag them into your level if you want, and then the details panel there, hit Edit Blueprint, Open Blueprint Editor. Either way. And of course, when we get that little tab, we want to bring that up so we have a full window to work with on our NPC. So you'll see right away there's all this pre-made code on our NPC. Well, okay, this is the code that the third-person character is using, right? That our player is supposed to be using. We can actually leave this alone. None of it's going to affect what our NPC does. So I'll just leave it alone rather than delete it. But we do want to make sure that our NPC looks different from our player character, just so we don't get confused. So let's go over to the viewport tab. And in the viewport tab, click on the, first off, let's just delete the camera. NPCs don't need cameras, right? No one's seeing through the NPC. So click on the camera, hit delete key. Okay, that'll help us kind of distinguish it. Okay, this is an NPC. And then also click on his mesh. That's just his body. Click on his body, right? And in the details panel where it says materials, click on the thing that says material, and let's just change his material to be something else so he looks different. I'm going to change him to this wood pine material, because why not? Okay, so change it to this wood pine material, and then hop on to the front of Unreal. And why don't we just drag a few of these NPCs from our content browser into our world. So drag several of them into the world so we can see what they look like. And you can drag a lot if you want. Not too many though, it'll get really laggy if you drag in like 100. But that's good, that's a lot of NPCs. And I can clearly see, okay, this is my player character. Here are all my NPCs. If I hit play, I can see them all. And they're animated and they're breathing and all that, but they don't have any logic, okay? Because that's what we got to do in a minute. We got to program them to do something. I'm gonna hit escape. There we are. Okay, so you've been dragging NPCs from your content browser into your world. Again, if you need to find it in your content browser, just type in the word NPC into the search bar in the middle there, and it'll come up. Now, there are a couple ways to approach this, right? I mentioned the Skyrim example before where an NPC might decide to go to the blacksmith forge, but then he might decide to go to the well, and then he might go to the sawmill, and then he might go to a certain grave at a graveyard, and then he might go to the tavern, and then he might go to his house. So all those things are kind of hot spots if you think about it. Those aren't random locations. Now you can program it so that he chooses to go to which one when randomly, but they're not just, in the middle of a field somewhere, They're not in the NPC decides to go to the middle of the stream for half an hour, just stand there. They're all spots chosen by the level designer. And we want to make a system similar to that because, yeah, we can program it. It's not hard. We can program any of these NPCs to find a random location in the world to go to, and then they'll just go to that random location. But what if that random location is at the mouth of a volcano, or in the water, underneath the water, or some, there are only a certain limited amount of spots that are kind of like hot spots or spots with features or whatever it is that NPC would realistically go to. So in order to design our system with that in mind, what I like to do is create something called a waypoint. And the idea behind the waypoint is it's this little blueprint, coded object thing, right? This little thing we'll drag into our world. And wherever we put it in our world, our NPC will consider that a location to go to. That's the idea there. That way, yeah, they can choose randomly, but they'll only be going to the locations that we say an NPC can choose to go to randomly. So let's create a waypoint. And lucky for us, even though it's a blueprint, we don't even need to put any code on the waypoint. We just need to make it a blueprint so that it is its own kind of thing that we can tell the NPCs to look for in the world. All right, how do we make a blueprint? Lower left, green Add New button. I'd like you to click this. Click Add New. Choose Blueprint Class. And then you get this big window that, well, not big, small window that comes up with these different options. So you clicked Add New, Blueprint Class, and then this window that's called Pick Parent Class. I can tell you right off the bat, 99.9% of the time, you're going to be choosing Actor, including this time. What the other things do on here are just more specific versions of Actor, and you'll be choosing those depending on what you're trying to do. For example, Pawn and Character are for the type of coded object, a blueprint, for when you want that your player to be able to control that thing, right? So a vehicle, another character, your third-person character, those things are all going to be pawns or characters, right? But like I said, 99% of the time, you'll be choosing Actor, and that's what we're choosing right now. So choose Actor, okay? And just name this Waypoints. So once you hit Create, it'll come up in your content browser, and you want to rename it Waypoint. Next, let's, well, actually, so that's Waypoint. We don't even need to double-click Waypoint. We don't need to open it up. Like I said, we're not putting any code on Waypoint at all. We're just making a thing called Waypoint. And once you've done that, you hit Add New, you did Blueprint Class, you chose Actor, you named it Waypoint. Drag a couple of these waypoints into your world. Okay, these are going to be locations the NPCs can choose to go to. You drag as many as you want. So I dragged one over there, I'll drag this one over here, I'll drag one way over here on top of this little hill. I'll put one over here, put one here. Okay, so you've got a few waypoints in your world. Again, we haven't coded anything, so we hit play, they're not going to go anywhere. Let's change that. Let's start our coding process now. So I want you to hop on over to your NPC blueprints, okay? So you probably have them still open like me. Again, if you don't, you can always open a blueprint by clicking on the thing in the world, in the details panel, hitting Edit Blueprint, Open Blueprint Editor. So we want to be on the NPC's blueprint right now. And I want you to go on to his event graph. And here you can zoom in and out and all that. And you want to hold right mouse button to move around the blueprint graph and find an empty area of space where there's no code in our way so we can write our logic here. So first thing I want to do is let's contain all this in what's called a custom event. So you've heard me say before, there's different types of events in Unreal, and then all programming. Events, what are events? Events are things that happen, right? An event happened today. Okay, this charismatic, handsome, super intelligent, underrated, beautifully minded teacher from 641 came to visit your class to teach a class. That's an event, right? That happened. That event will cause other things to happen. For example, some of you might be like, whoa, I'm going to start my own video game company and become rich and become a millionaire and not forget who taught me and thank them later in a financial manner. And maybe you'll go on to become millionaires, right, as a result of this event that happened. So in a programming context, this event looks like Mr. Torres comes to class, that's the name of the event, and then I learned Unreal, I went home, I practiced some more, I became a millionaire, I gave him 10%. Those things happen within the context of the code. So we're doing the same thing right now. We're going to make a custom event. So right click in this empty area and type in custom event. And you can name your custom event. And I want you to name this NPC go to random waypoints. You can have spaces. I like to name my events and my variables super literally so that if I ever look at them, I know exactly what they mean. So we're naming this event NPC go to random waypoint. And the point is, hey, if this event gets called, it's going to cause the NPC to go to a random waypoint. And by called, I mean the event gets triggered in some way. Something has to trigger it, like a domino, right? Something has to call this event and say, hey, event, please happen. That's the idea. We'll call the event in a minute, a little after we write some of it. We'll call it from begin play, which is an event that happens on every blueprint anyway. And it's just when the game starts, right? So when the game starts, we're going to call NPC go to random waypoint. But we'll code that part in a second. Right now, let's fill in the code for the NPCs finding the waypoint and then choosing to go to that waypoint, right? So we have our custom event. It's called NPC go to random waypoint. What I'd like you to do next is drag off that event and let go and type in get all actors of class. And choose get all actors of class. I really like using this node. You'll probably use it a lot. It's just a way of getting everything in the world that's of a certain type of blueprint. So what we're going to do is we're going to get all of the waypoints. And it's just going to produce a list of those waypoints. And then we can do things with that, right? So get all actors of class. And on get all actors of class, where it says actor class, select class, that is a drop-down to choose, well, what are you getting? So click where it says select class. And then just type in a waypoint. It'll come up. The blueprint we made before will come up, and choose waypoint. So get all actors of class. In actor class, you clicked where it says select class. In the drop down, you've chosen waypoint. So it's going to get all of our waypoints. And it's going to get them all. And all of them are going to be accessible where it says out actors. So out actors. Out actors, this little Minecrafty kind of block looking icon thing, that's our list. It's called an array. So if you hear the term array, that just means a list. That's all this is, a programming term for a list. This would be a list of all of our waypoints. So drag off of the out actors part. So drag off out actors on get all actors of class. And then type in the word get and choose get. It might say like get a copy, get a reference. If it says that, then choose get a copy. But just choose get, okay? And what get does is get is a function for getting something from a list. So it takes in a list and it's going to give you one of the things in the list, right? Well, which item in the list is it going to give you? Well, that's what this little number here is for. So see this number says 0, right? That's just saying, hey, can you get me item 0 from the list, which is to say the first item in the list. So right now it's just saying, get me the first waypoint. What we want to do is we want to make this a random number, right? So it doesn't always get this, because if we run this code, well, first off, nothing's going to happen yet because we haven't told the AI to move to it yet. But if we were to run this code and our AI was told to move to it, they would all move to the exact same waypoint every time and then stop, right? Because it's only going to move to waypoint 0. So we want to do some sort of random number function in here. And that's what we're going to do right now. So on the get, where it says 0, and there's that green circle pin thing, let's drag off there, let go, and we're going to type in random. Okay. Don't choose anything yet, just type in random. I just want to explain sort of how we have to think about this, because we could just do a random integer. By the way, integer just means a number. That's all it is. Fancy words for a number. And it's a number without decimals, whereas a float, if you see that, that's a number with decimals. Yeah. The difference there is I can have 1.5 apples, right? But I cannot have 1.5 humans. Or if I did, that would be quite a mess. So difference between floating point, floats, and ints. So integer can't have decimals. So whole numbers only. So anyway, we're going to choose a random integer. Now, if we just chose a random integer, here we have a little bit of a problem. What if we have 10 waypoints in our world, but our random integer gives us a random number of 19. What's going to happen? There is no waypoint number 19. There's only 10. In that case, the code's going to break, or it's not going to work, or the NPCs are not going to go anywhere. So what we want to do is we want to do random integer in range. That lets us determine a minimum and a maximum from where it can choose. To choose random integer in range, that's what I want you to pick. So click random integer in range. And we dragged off of get. We chose random integer in range. And you have this minimum and you have this maximum. Minimum and maximum. Now for minimum, what do you think we want minimum to be? Yeah, 0. Good job. Yeah, 0. If there's anything in the list, there's going to be an item 0 at least. But the maximum is interesting because the maximum is going to change. If we start dragging in more waypoints into our world, well, then we're going to have to adjust this maximum. And we could say like, okay, maximum is going to be 10 and type in 10. But that's not really fair to us as level designers because, or to whoever, if you're working on a team especially, because if we start putting in more waypoints into our world because our level becomes more sophisticated and cooler and we want to do more things with it, that means we have to go in and edit this code every time to change the maximum. And I don't like that. What would be better is if we could just ask, hey, what is the length of the list? And then just put the length of a list as the maximum. Because then it won't pick any integer it won't pick any number that doesn't already have an associated waypoint with it, right? And we can do that. We can do that with a node called length. So drag off of out actors on the get all actors of class. Drag off of out actors on the get all actors of class. That's our list, right? So you're dragging it off of out actors and type in length. L-E-N-G-T-H. Okay. Type in length. Well, length. This gives us the length of the list. And we're going to plug in that length into the max on random integer in range. So repeating the step, all we did was on the get all actors of class, we dragged off of out actors, we let go, we typed in length, we chose length, and then we plugged length into the max part of the random integer in range. All right, the hard part's mostly over. What this is successfully doing is it is getting all of our waypoints that are in the world, no matter how many they are, and it's going to pick one randomly, and then it's going to produce that random one off the bubble here on get. So this bubble on the right of get, that's going to be the waypoint that was chosen randomly. So we can now use that. But we'll use that in a second. What I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to continue off of get all actors of class. So drag a wire off of get all actors of class and type in AI move to. And then choose AI move to. So you're dragging off of get all actors of class and you're choosing AI move to. AI move to is a function for moving AI, moving any kind of character to a location, non-player character, NPC. All right, there's about 2 things we want to fill in on this, which is there's the option on AI move to called pawn. That's the thing that's moving towards the target, right? So what is moving towards something? And in this case, we're actually coding all of this AI moving code on the NPC itself. So where it says pawn, what's moving towards the target, that's just going to be self. So drag off pawn and type in self. Choose get reference to self. So where it says pawn on your AI move to, drag off pawn, and then choose self. All right, hang in there. The hard part is over. Where it says target actor on AI move to, that target actor is the thing we're moving towards, the things we want to get to. in which case we want that to be the waypoint. Well, where it says get on the waypoint, see this blue circle, and target actors is also this blue circle. Just plug that right into target actor. So you're plugging in get into target actor on AI move 2. Now, this code will work, but I want to add one more thing real quick. Actually, well, it won't work because we haven't triggered it yet. Remember I said about 5 minutes ago, I said we need to trigger this event. Nothing's triggering it, but we're going to trigger it on begin play. So right beneath this code or above it, whatever, I just need you to grab another empty spot of graph. Just right click on the empty part of the graph and type in begin play. Okay, choose event begin play. Event begin play is an event. Okay, event begin play is an event that happens once, happens right when the game starts. Okay, when it begins, event begin play, and so we'll just trigger our event when the game starts. So you brought up begin play by right clicking, typing begin play, and then drag off begin play, and now just type in the name of our custom event. NPC go to random waypoint. And choose that. That's all you got to do for that. Now this code works. So event begin play. So when the game begins, it's going to call our custom event. Our custom event's here. It's going to do all of this code. And that's the idea. Let's hit play. And there's one more thing I realized, but hit play and we'll see what happens. Oh no, everybody's standing still. What's happening here? Hit escape. Well, thankfully, the next step doesn't involve code. We just have to go to the front of Unreal again, to the level editor. And we need to drag a box around these guys. That's all we got to do. It's a box with a very complicated name, but it's not complicated to do. We need to look up what's called a nav mesh bounds volume. Again, don't be intimidated. It's just a box. On the left in modes panel, type in nav, N-A-V, and look at the thing that is called nav mesh bounds volume. Okay. What this is this is responsible for pre-calculating all of the potential areas that an NPC can walk on. It's going to figure out, okay, there's a cliff there, the NPC can't run off the cliff. Oh, okay, there's a wall there. In the NPC, if the wall is blocking the NPC, I'm going to tell the NPC to go around it. That's all the nav mesh bounds volume does. So without one, your NPCs can't move. So what I want you to do is drag the nav mesh bounds volume into the world. You get this box, and then all you got to do is scale it. So do the scale tool, right? The third button in the toolbar, or you press R. It'll also turn on the scale tool, and just make the box really big. Make it as big as you want your NPCs to be able to move around in your world. So I'm just scaling my box. Like I said, this is just going to pre-calculate all the areas that they can run around in. And if the NPC, like let's say if there's a waypoint outside this box and the NPC is going to that waypoint, as soon as he hits the end of this box, he won't be able to move anymore. He'll just stop. So the box has got to be as big as you want the whole world of your NPCs to run around it. I'm going to do this. You can if you want to. You press the P key, and that'll show you all the areas that they can walk around in. So you can see on mine, I've got some areas of landscape that aren't this green, which means they're probably too steep or whatever, so the NPCs won't walk there. So it pre-calculated all that stuff. And then you can just press P again to get rid of that. Okay, hit play. Ah, there we go. NPCs running different directions. A bunch decided to go over here. So on your end, hit play. Let's see who's working. NPCs are running and running. Now, there's one thing that's happening here that we want to improve, which is as soon as they get to their waypoint, they're done. They don't do anything again. And that's because we only called the event on begin play. It never happens again. what we want to do is as soon as they get to a waypoint, for the whole custom event to be called again, and then it'll go to the next waypoint, and the next waypoint, and the next one for infinity. So hit escape, go on over to your NPC again. This part's really easy, really easy. No coding really. Just hop onto your NPC, look at the graph here. Go over to this AI move to node. If you look on the AI move to node, on the very end of it, it says on success, on fail. These fire if, well, on success fires if he gets to the waypoint successfully. On fail means he tried, but he didn't get to the waypoint. Something stopped him in the way or something. What we'll do is just on success, we'll just call the NPC go to random waypoint event again, just like how we did here in begin play. So drag off of on success and type in NPC go to random waypoint. All you gotta do. Bonus points for those of you who want to plug on fail into it as well. I like to do that because sometimes something will prevent him from getting to the waypoint. And if he doesn't get to the waypoint, then but he's stuck. He stays stuck. He never decides to go to another waypoint. So I'm going to plug in on fail into that NPC go to random waypoint. And that's it. That's all you got to do. You hit play. They're going to run around infinitely and continue to go to different waypoints. I'm going to hit play now. You'll see what that looks like. Here they are. And as soon as they get to one waypoint, come back. And all of a sudden, my world feels much more alive. All right, I'm gonna hit escape. I'll leave this code up here just for a few minutes. I'm gonna turn the lights on and we'll do like a 5-minute break just to kind of like let us get back to reality. And then when we come back from 5-minute break, let's do our day-night cycle stuff, okay? Yes. Yeah, just make sure you sign out.
Yeah. Any help over here? We're gonna hit create.
Except for the flight drive, like I did.
Any questions from the audience? Are you starting like 2 minutes? So if you need the restroom, sign out, go right in.
I'll consider it. So I got my next period program. I was there. I think you call.
Anything else for me?
No, that's okay, thank you.
If you're doing blood, log out. Take a while. Did you get your, did you know? I have no idea.
Yeah, I think they'll send it next week.
Okay. All right, let's get started. We get out of this period, I think, at 9:04 or something. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. All right, so take your seats. Get back to Unreal. We'll continue the same project. So we're doing the same project. Live stream's still up. So we're in the same project. We've done a lot today, a lot of code. And now let's take a look at how a day-night cycle works. This is kind of going to answer your weather question. It's more, I can't really get too into the weather stuff today. Weather is going to involve particles. I'll just tell you off the top. But let's go to the front of Unreal. And I want you to zoom out of your world a little bit. And I want you to click on anywhere in the sky. So we have the sky sphere blueprint selected. So I'll click on your sky. And in the details panel of sky, you'll see there's all these different settings. Now sky is kind of cool because what it'll do is it will automatically change the color of the sky based on where your sun is located. Now if you look in the details panel of sky sphere blueprint, right underneath the default section, it says directional light actor and has this thing called light source. That's your sun. That's your sun. And what it does is if you have it set to that, which it is set to a light in your level, it decides to make that light its sun. And based on the angle that light is in the sky, it's going to change the way the sky appears. So if that sun is toward the horizon, it's going to make all of the cloud and all the skies orange and all like it's at sunset or something, right? That sky sphere blueprint is doing that code for you. So we're not going to mess with any of the code on the sky sphere blueprint. But we do want to keep that in mind about how that's working. And we want to take a look at the light source as well. So in the world outliner up here, world outliner is in the upper right. In the search bar there, type in light and look for the thing called light source
light source. Click on light source. And if you want, let's just rename it sun so we know, hey, that's really our sun. To rename, you could just hit right click on the thing that says light source and choose edit, rename, or you could just do a slow double click on the name. Either way, just name it the sun. That'll just help us understand what it is. All right. To make a day-night cycle work, what we want to do is, like I said, the sky will change automatically because the code is already on it, based on where the sun's angle is at. And what we want to do is we want to code that so that the sun over time changes its angle. And the angle is going to end up being on what's called if you look in the details panel where it says rotation, the y-axis is the one that determines the look of the sun. So you don't do this, but I'm going to do it for you. If you have sun selected in the details panel where it says rotation, if I start changing those numbers in the y-axis, you'll see my landscape starts to go from a dark to a not so dark, because that's controlling all the light that exists. The sky sphere stays the same right now, and that's because it needs to be refreshed. Just has to do with the coding on the sky sphere. But we're going to make sure that happens anyway when we do our stuff. One thing I do need you to do, though, is with sun selected, in the details panel there's a setting called mobility. It's 4 down. It's right like under location, rotation, scale, and then goes mobility. Mobility, you need to change the sun to be movable because it's going to be moving. So make sure it's not set at stationary, it's not set at static, but it's set as movable. This will allow it to move while the game is being played. If not, it's just going to give you a warning and it won't actually move. So check mark it as movable. Okay. The code we want to do is going to happen on what's called the level blueprint. Right? You heard me mention before that a blueprint is an object where we code stuff on. It's a coded object. Your level is 1, 2. And what's cool about coding in the level blueprint is it has access to everything in the whole level. So like how we had access to our spotlight when we were coding on our third-person character, we could just drag spotlight from the components tab onto the graph. The level works like that too, except everything in your level is a component of the level blueprint. So anything in the world outliner, anything in the world, whatever, right, is all accessible, can all be changed on the level blueprint, which is perfect because our sun's in our level, our sky is in our level, all that good stuff. All right, how do we get to our level blueprint? In the middle of Unreal at the top, where it says Blueprints, click on Blueprints, again, the middle top, and then choose Open Level Blueprint. Blueprints, Open Level Blueprint. Open it up. So middle top of Unreal, click Blueprints, Open Level Blueprint. And it's going to give you this graph. There's no viewport here because really the viewport is our level. That's what the level looks like. This is just for the code, just for the code. And what's great is, like I said, we can access anything in here. What we want to do is, first thing we want to do is let's pull up an event, okay? Right click, and I want you to type in event and then tick, T-I-C-K. Choose event tick. Okay. Event tick's a cool event. It's kind of the opposite of begin play, sort of. I guess end play would be the opposite of begin play. But event tick is, rather than just getting fired once, fires constantly. Like it fires at every, like, you know, hundreds of times or less or whatever per second, and it never stops firing. So it's a good place to code something that you want to happen constantly. Right? What I want you to do next is I want you to right click. And what's cool is if you have your sun selected, when you right click on an empty area of graph, you'll notice without even typing anything in this new menu that comes up, it lets you create a reference to that thing. Okay, that's the same as when we dragged the spotlight onto our graph when we did our flashlight. Okay, So we could, when you right click, you could do create a reference to the sun. It's going to do that for whatever you currently have selected. So since I have selected, and you should too, selected sun in our world outliner, when I right click, I can choose create a reference to sun. So I want you to do that. Right click, create reference to sun, and then that will let us do things to the sun. And mainly what we want to do to our sun is we want to change its rotation, right? Because as it rotates, the sky will update. So drag off of sun. And I think I actually need to, it's one of those moments where I need to Google how they do it real quick. Just to make sure I'm doing it right. Because the sun stuff can be a little tricky. Am I doing that thing? Yes, make rotation, add actor. We'll do it something like that. Okay, so drag off of sun and type in add rotation. This is going to rotate it. And choose add actor local rotation. Add actor local rotation. Now we'll do what they're doing. They're kind of doing something kind of cool where you can change the speed of your day-night cycle for testing purposes. So we'll do that. It just seems a little more complicated than we want. But what we'll do is, let's see, where should we start? Well, first off, plug in event tick into the add actor local rotation. Make sure they're connected. Next, on event tick, there's this thing called delta seconds. That has to do with, that's basically the number of seconds, is usually a fraction of a second, since the last frame of the game passed. That doesn't really matter. All it is, just know that that's the remainder of time before the whole event gets fired again. What we want to do is drag off delta seconds and then type in the word multiply, because we're going to multiply it. And you get all these different options. You want to do float times float. Remember I mentioned floats before? This is the other time of number. Yep. It's the fractional kind, beginning of fractions. Okay. Now you've gotten this. Let's do, so what are we timesing delta seconds by? Okay, we're going to make that a variable. Making a new variable can happen in one of two ways. We could either hit the plus variable on the left here, or the even faster way is just drag off of this. So what the thing we're timesing it by, drag off there, and then in the panel that comes up, choose promote to variable. So now we're timesing it by a variable. And it probably names it new var, whatever. You want to rename that to sun speed. So name it sun speed, and then hit compile in the upper left. And let's set some default number for sun speed currently. So to do that, you got to hit this compile. Again, you do that in the upper left. So it's a little gear icon in the upper left. Hit compile. And what that lets us do is now with sun speed selected, in the details panel, we can change its speed. So where it says sun speed, let's set it to 30. 30 is a good preview number. So set sun speed to 30 where it says default value. Okay, and next up, what I want to do is Where it says add actor local rotation, I'm doing this a little different from the example. If some of you are following this example that I pulled up, that's fine too. But what I want you to do is right click on where it says the connection point for delta rotation, okay? When you hover your mouse over it, it turns into like a crosshair, okay? Just right click on that bubble and choose split struct pin. What does that mean? That means if you ever have one of these numbers like that one is, location, rotation and stuff, where it's a bunch of numbers combined, right? Rotation is X, Y, Z, it's 3 numbers combined. If you just want to do one thing to one of those numbers, you could split it. So again, I'll just show you what that looks like. Hover over that circle, right click, split struct pin. Okay. And what you want to do then is you want to plug in the output of this multiplication, right? You want to plug that into the Y value. Because again, Y is the thing that when we rotate it, the sun appears to move in the sky. Just happens to be Y, that's the way it's set up. The other two could be left alone. So plug in the multiplication into the Y. All right, almost out of the woods, almost done. Let's get a reference to our sky now, because we need to update our sky and tell the sky that the sun moved, just how the sky works. So to do that, go over to the front of Unreal, click on your sky, or find it in the World Outliner, whatever. But make sure your sky is selected. And then once your sky is selected, go back to the map, and then right-click on an empty area on the graph and choose Create a Reference to Sky Sphere Blueprint. So you're finding sky in your world, going back to the blueprint, right-clicking, Create Reference to Sky. Okay, then just drag off of Sky Sphere Blueprint, the reference, and type in Update, and choose Update Sun Direction. That's a custom event, right? We've been doing that on the Sky Sphere Blueprint. That's going to update the look of the sky based on where the sun's at. So again, just dragged off the Sky Sphere Blueprint, Update Sun Direction, connect those, and let's see if that works. Hit play. Ah, here we go. There's the sun moving in the sky rather fast. Like I said, this is a preview speed. Then it sets, sunset, and then the stars come out. How cool. And if you want it to go slower, just change that sun speed variable we made. So if I want to go half as fast, I'll change it from 30 to 15. I have a longer day-night cycle. And you want it to be like a really long one, like for an RPG or something, change it to like 1 second. Nope, it's still too fast. That's why we're using fractions. This is why we're using floats. Maybe change it to 0.2. Okay, something to experiment with. So again, I'll leave that up. The code for this day-night cycle, I'll leave this up for a few seconds so that you can have this on the stream if you need to. Write down the number of the video, where it's at, whatever. That's what that code looks like. And it's on the level blueprint. This is on the level blueprint, and it looks like this in order to have a day-night cycle. All right, there's one item on the list that I was asked to cover. One of those two, there's inventory system, there's items. They're kind of related. they're kind of related. So let me show you how I would make an item. So if I was going to make an item that you can pick up or something, make the sun a little bit brighter from rotating. Right there we go. I like it. What I'd do is I'd make an actor, a blueprint actor, called item or pickup item. And what I do is I make it so that when the player gets that item, it depends on how they pick it up. The simplest way is, hey, if they just collide with some invisible box or invisible sphere or something, that it destroys the actual blueprint, so they can't pick it up infinitely, and they see that it leaves as soon as they get to it, and then you add something in their inventory, and the inventory system's controlled by some widget or whatever. I can make it, you can make things so that, when the player goes up, they press E, then adds to their inventory. It's just a little bit more complex, but not that much. Or doing stuff like with the cursor and all that. What I do is I would do this, and feel free to follow along. I'll go along at a follow along pace. I think we could definitely knock this out in the 15 minutes we have. So I want everybody to, again, this is like our third lesson from today, hit add new. In lower left, add new. Choose blueprint class. And like I said, 99% of the time we'll be doing this. Choose actor. And then just name it item. Name it item. Then I want you to double click on item and open up its blueprints. And this is what a blank blueprint looks like. There's absolutely no code on it whatsoever. There's nothing. It's totally invisible. It gives us this little sphere ball thing just so that when we're dragging out into the editor, we can see where it's at, but the player can't see that. There's nothing on this at all. So first thing we want to do is we want to add, like, hey, what does the object look like? Okay, because it's an item. The player needs to be able to see it, kind of understand what it is. Is it a gun? Is it a note? Is it a apple? What is it? What is it that I'm picking up? So with that, we'll just make a static mesh for it. So click Add Component on the upper left, and then just choose Static Mesh. And in the Details panel of Static Mesh, where it says Static Mesh, the static mesh you're setting it to, it's currently set to none. Click that drop down for Static Mesh, and you can choose anything you want. You have some static meshes. Most of them are just shapes because you're in starter content. I'm cool, so I think I have some assets actually in here, like 3D models and stuff that I will use. So pick something you like. It could just be a ball or a cube or whatever. I'll be fair, I'll choose this thing. You all have this. It's called SM Statue. There's a little statue thing. Okay. So this is what, now this blueprint has something you can see. It's a static mesh. It's an object. And what I want to do next is, I mentioned a good way of making it so you can pick up is, hey, you get close enough to it and then it just goes in your inventory, right? You collide with this invisible box or sphere and then it just goes in your inventory. So let's add that invisible box or sphere, okay? So on the left, click Add Component again, and just type in collision, C-O-L, and you get all the 3 different types of collision that come up. Box, capsule, sphere, they're all the same. It just depends what shape you like. I like sphere collision because it's going to pick up no matter what direction you show up at equal distances or whatever. So I'm going to choose sphere collision. I want you to choose one of those collisions. And then in the details panel of sphere collision, you can scale it with there's a setting called sphere radius. You could also scale it in a normal way with the scale tools. Either one will work. Or you can increase that number. Mine says 32 in the details panel called sphere radius to something bigger, and it'll also get bigger. So you don't want it too big, but maybe like right there is a good size. So if the character gets near this, he's going to take the object as soon as he hits this sphere. Now, once your sphere is in a good size, scroll down to the bottom of the details panel with that sphere selected. Bottom of the details panel on the right. You scroll down to the bottom, you have all these events. See, it's in a category called events, right? We know what events are now. We've been dealing with them all day. Events are things that happen, that cause other things to happen. One right here, it's toward the top, called on component begin overlap. This is the one we're going to use because it's going to sense whenever something overlaps this sphere. Whenever something moves into this sphere. So there's a big green plus button just right next to on component begin overlap. Click the plus button and then go to your event graph. And now you have this event for when something overlaps this sphere. And you have all these options on it. I never use any of these except for one called other actor. This one you need to use because your sphere is going to overlap a bunch of stuff. If this blueprint's on the ground, you know, then it's going to be overlapping the ground. It's going to be overlapping other static meshes potentially. So this thing called other actor, we're going to drag off that right now. So drag off other actor. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to check to make sure it's only our character that's overlapping this item before we do any other code. So before we destroy the mesh and we make the thing picked up, whatever, we have to make sure that the other actor that is overlapping this sphere is the third person character. So type in third person character. Choose that, choose cast the third person character. And there you go. Now, this is, or essentially almost done here. I would add other code into here in between what we're about to do, depending on what I was trying to do. For example, if this was our horror game and let's say you have your flashlight, but you need to pick up batteries for your flashlight to work, I would do something to do with points in a battery variable located on the player, and I'd restore the battery life, you know, on that variable somewhere in this code here. But we're not doing that right now. We just want to make sure that you can pick up the item so that it's gone and it's clear that you've destroyed it or whatever, that you have it now. In which case we want something called destroy actor. So drag off of cast as third person characters, drag off that node with the white wire, right? And type in destroy actor. Choose that, and then just leave that. You want to make sure nothing's plugged into target, because if nothing's plugged into target, where it's going to say self, and we want the self to destroy. Self is, hey, what object is doing this code? In this case, we're on our item blueprint, so it's going to destroy itself when the third-person character overlaps it, right? So you compile, whatever, go to the front of Unreal, and now, from your content browser, drag a few of these items into your world. And we're going to test this. So when you go up to these items, as soon as you get close enough, they should disappear because you've collected them, whatever. All right, I'm gonna hit play. All my NPCs are running like crazy. And by the way, I just had a thought. How cool would it be to put one of these items at all my waypoints, but instead of casting to the third person character, you cast the NPC on the on begin overlap, which means the NPCs, once they hit those, get near those items, they destroy them. Kind of cool to watch. I'm going to run over this, and whoa, yep, there it goes, deleted. Boom, deleted. Boom, picked up. So it's deleting the object in space, but your character doesn't know that because, for example, if this is a baseball bat, and your character has the baseball bat on him all the time, but it's invisible and he can't use it until he picks up one of the baseball bat on the floor, you know, then he's going to think he picked it up, even though we know as designers that we're just destroying the object. But that would be, oh, forgot one. Okay, hit escape. All right, bonus extra credit lesson, right? Real quick, do this because this is super easy. Hopping over back to your item. Click viewport, and just show this is kind of fun. What if I want this thing to rotate and spin? I have been guilty of, and so have been students, of doing a bunch of crazy math on event tick to make it happen. You don't need to do that. All you gotta do is click on add component in the upper left, type in rotating, and you use this thing called rotating movement component. Click on that, and what's great about rotating movement component is it works by default, and then it also has a bunch of different settings you can change in the details panel. If I hit play, look at these, they're spinning. They're actually rotating. It's good for a lot of games, things like coins, collectible coins, things like that. And it's just something you add in the components tab, rotating movement component. All right, as far as inventories, I don't have time to cover it, but what I would do is I would create some sort of widget, okay? Widgets are just fancy words for a menu. Menu looks like this. I'm gonna go too fast to follow along, but I'm just doing this so that you can see. I click Add New, User Interface, choose Widget Blueprint. Add New, User Interface, Widget Blueprint. I name this Inventory Menu. And then double click that to open it up, okay? And here I can have buttons, I can have images for icons of various types of icons. Everything again is changed to the details panel. Okay. Right, so I have this. Put text on it, whatever. All the good stuff. And there's all this kind of coding things you can do with here. There's something called binding, where you click the binding, create binding, and you can put through code what's supposed to appear here. So I could, for example, bind this image, create binding, to whatever, an item. Maybe my item stored on the player, so get player character. Make sure he's a third-person character. And if you had some variable on it, for example, if you had a variable that was set to the item type, the blueprint we just made, and this item type had any variables on it, and my third-person character was collecting those items, I could get, for example, what is the static mesh being used by this item? Or what is the texture that I want for this item? And then I can pass that through directly into the image so that your items here are populated with the right stuff. So again, that's as far as a hands-on thing, that's a little bit more than we can do right now. But I think we did a lot today. This was one of my most productive lessons I think I've taught in this class. So thank you for sticking through. Save your games. I know most of you are logging out. You still got like 2 minutes. If you want to work on it, 1 minute. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Do you think you could watch it with that computer for like a good 2 minutes